want to thank Mindful Media Mandy for this comment and for prompting me to finally do a video on Blavatsky, who has indeed had a profound influence on the New Age movement, and some of her ideas, especially those regarding root races, have indeed been picked up and misappropriated by some nefarious individuals and groups. So I want to first talk about Blavatsky and Theosophy, and then another philosophy that was based on Theosophy called Ariosophy, which fed into some darker things. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was born in Russia, technically part of the Russian Empire that is now Ukraine. She was born into a wealthy aristocratic family. Her father was a fairly high-ranking military officer, so they moved around quite a bit, and this no doubt contributed to Helena's lifelong fascination with travel. During her 20s and 30s, she traveled extensively throughout Europe and Middle East, but she didn't keep a journal, so we don't really know for sure whether her accounts of this period of her life are accurate or not. Ever since she was a child, Blavatsky was fascinated with the occult and paranormal activity. She was really into spiritualism, which was very popular in Europe in the mid-19th century. And it was during her travels that she first encountered a mysterious Indian man that she called Master Morya. According to Blavatsky, Master Morya was part of a group of enlightened, immortal individuals called the Ascended Masters, or the Masters of Ascended Wisdom, who were meant to serve as spiritual guides for humanity. Blavatsky claimed that Master Morya was from Tibet. She was very fascinated by Tibet. She thought most of the Ascended Masters were from there. In fact, she claimed to visit Tibet during her travels with Master Morya and another Ascended Master called Kuthumi. There are some questions about this because at the time, Tibet was closed to Westerners. As part of her travels, Blavatsky ended up in the United States. That's where she met Henry Steele Olcott, with whom she started the Theosophical Society in 1875. A little bit later, they went to India and lived there for a number of years and started a theosophical branch in India. Blavatsky's most famous books were Isis Unveiled, which came out in 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, which came out in 1888, a few years before she died of influenza. Along with helping to bring a lot of ideas from the East to the West, such as karma, reincarnation, and so forth, Blavatsky and the Theosophists also introduced a lot of questionable ideas, such as the idea that Atlantis and Lemuria were real places, and this whole idea about root races. One of those root races was famously the Aryans, the so-called fifth root race out of 7. To Blavatsky's credit, she did not describe the Aryans as being light-skinned individuals. This came later, but she did sort of suggest a racial hierarchy that later students of Theosophy, including Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Anthroposophy, they doubled down on. To be fair to both Blavatsky and Steiner, Europe in the 19th century was definitely awash in racism and anti-Semitism. They were no doubt a product of their times. One could even argue that Blavatsky was a little bit more cosmopolitan than most, since she had done a fair amount of traveling and definitely encountered people of different ethnicities. In any case, this did not stop the appropriation of some of her ideas from some very unsavory characters, including 2 guys who went on to develop a spin-off of Theosophy called Ariosophy, the so-called wisdom of the Aryans. First of these was a guy named Guido von Liszt, who developed something called Armanism, which was a kind of folk religion based on the rites and rituals and ruins of pre-Christian Europe. The second guy was named Georg Lanz von Liebenfels. He was a Catholic monk who claimed to have an enlightened experience and then developed a philosophy called Arianism. Liebenfels incorporated pseudo-archaeology and biblical reinterpretation into a book that he called Theozoology, or the Science of the Sodomite, Apelings, and the Divine Electron. He presented a very complicated cosmology, but basically the Aryans were seen as god-men, whereas everyone else was considered a lower race who he felt should be sterilized and sent to labor camps. Needless to say, these horrible ideas were taken up by a lot of horrible groups, which fed into the philosophy that we now call Yahtzeism. For further information on this bizarre confluence of ideas, I have several other early videos. One is called Yahtzee Spaceship Energy. I also have a series on Aryan aliens, which talks about the overlap of UFOs and white supremacy, and another one on the Kali Yuga, which talks about how that is also tied with some very questionable ideas.